Soon enough, the X-Men are coming to the MCU. We're years out from the Fox-Disney merger and all the pre-existing contracts should be expiring soon. It's been 4 years since Dark Phoenix and a whole 17 years since X-Men The Last Stand. I can't tell you how hyped I am to see them finally make their return again. As of right now, we already know that Deadpool 3 is coming next year in May, and there's still the X-Men 97 revival coming later this year, but we haven't heard even a whisper about it since last year, so make of it what you will.
I believes it when I sees it.
Which begs the question, who's going to be the focus of these new films? Shy of the solo Wolverine films, they've always been an ensemble cast, but, generally speaking, there's still at least a core character that the audience follows.
Logan, we work as a team!
Yeah, good luck with that. Throw me.
Of the 13 Fox X-Men films, Wolverine was the star of 7 of them, another 3 by Professor X, 2 by Deadpool, and 1 with Mirage. Logan had his time to shine, and if I'm being 100% honest with you, Hugh Jackman had a phenomenal run wearing the claws, and it'll be far too difficult for any actor to step in the role after him. Professor X's story was told perfectly with the prequel films. That's kind of it for his stories to tell. I personally liked Blue Hunt's performance in The New Mutants. I just think the film just could have done better if it didn't have to contend with both the merger and the pandemic. What can I say? It wasn't perfect, but I love comic book films exploring genres outside of action and sci-fi. It's exploring the characters through horror, drama, and even a neo-western that really elevates the medium outside of the amusement park films that Scorsese warned us about. If we're looking at this like a business executive who only cares about the cold hard dollar, I'm willing to bet that they're going to go with Deadpool.
I know, right?
He sells merchandise, his movies perform exceptionally well, fans of all ages love him, even though that's an entirely different conversation on kids watching rated R films. A Deadpool-led X-Men franchise will make Disney a lot of money, but it's this feeling I can't shake. I want Deadpool in the MCU, just not this Disney-fied version of Deadpool. I think that if the MCU were to carry the superhero genre going forward and thrive, it would need a deep emotional lead character with a struggle over core philosophy like we see with the X-Men. That's why I think Cyclops should be the star of the MCU X-Men films. First things first, there's a lot of baggage left over from the original trilogy that needs to be addressed. If your only experience with the X-Men has been with the theatrical films, I wouldn't blame you if you thought Scott Summers was this stick-in-the-mud, turtleneck-wearing, in-sync-loving, preppy dork who doesn't deserve the pretty redhead. That's just not exactly who he is in the comics. Well, he is at times, but there's a lot more nuance than that. For starters, that's just how Wolverine sees him, and he's the perspective character for most of the films. And yeah, Cyclops is nowhere near as cool as the motorcycle-riding, cigar-smoking, leather-jacket-wearing badass who was a grizzled veteran of countless wars. It gave Logan a punching bag, and it just made him seem more badass just because of it. But this is just a film thing. And this dynamic is also flipped on its head when the roles are reversed. Cyclops is the lead character in the 12-episode X-Men anime series in 2011. After Jean Grey is killed before the series even starts, Scott is mourning her loss. He must weigh the responsibilities of being a leader with his own grief, and the only thing he can do at the beginning is just bottle it up and move forward. And this entire time, Logan is an insufferable a-hole who can't seem to do the bare minimum to try to work with the team. And that's just who Scott Summers really is in the comics. His story really starts when he was a kid and his family was flying around in an airplane. His dad was an Air Force test pilot and they were just taking a private jet out for a stroll when aliens attacked. Scott's mom gives him the one parachute and sends him off the plane with his younger brother Alex. The parachute catches fire and uses his mutant ability to slow down the descent. I feel like now would be a great time to kind of point out that he doesn't exactly shoot lasers out of his eyes. Oh no, that's too simple of an explanation. His eyes are actually portals to another dimension where the laws of physics are different, and according to the Marvel official handbook, the energy generates great directional concussive forces when they interact with the objects of this world. That's why his eyes don't burn things. Just ignore this moment from the films. It's don't think about it too hard kind of comic book logic. Anyways, he's later taken in by Mr. Sinister, who's setting up orphanages to find and experiment on mutant kids in order to create the perfect being. Sinister manipulates and tortures Scott for years until he escapes and is taken in by another X-Men villain, Jack O'Diamonds. At least this guy was just using him for petty crimes, so upgrade, I guess? He's eventually saved by Professor Charles Xavier and is taken in as one of his first pupils and the first X-Men. Scott has been with the team since the very beginning of the series, becoming the leader of the first team back in the 60s. And this is where we start seeing how Cyclops distinguishes himself. Yeah, his ability to shoot out optic blasts, but his real power is in his leadership, on the level of Captain America. This is why he's always seen as a hard-ass, because he needs to be. He is friends with everyone, yes, but he also needs to set that line in the sand when it's go time. He knows that if he makes even a single mistake, people will die. And at any time, if the X-Men lose a fight, that could be the end of the mutants. And he's had to carry that burden with him ever since he was a teenager. And if I'm being honest, there aren't too many films that actually cover the burden of leadership. Outside of, war films, historical dramas, or The Devil Wears Prada. We've had all the superhero solo films and all the team-up films. We never really had one that focuses solely on what it takes to lead. And again, I think a film about Cyclops could help show that, and it could help spice things up a little bit. Cyclops has also been the core of nearly every single story arc in the X-Men's just massive catalog of issues. He's had to carry the team while also trying to juggle the moral philosophy of Professor Xavier's coexistent pacifism with the revolutionary pragmatism of Magneto. It was Chris Claremont's run that defined who the X-Men really were. Giant-sized X-Men reshaped the team. Dark Phoenix Saga saw Jean Grey become a villain under the effects of the Phoenix Force, and she would eventually die. Don't worry, she comes back. Then we get to see Cyclops finally get a bit more of an edge to him with X-Factor. It was a splinter group from the X-Men that consisted of the original lineup from the 60s, and this time around, they're more actively seeking out dangerous mutants, like Apocalypse. He hasn't fully broken bad, but he's getting there. He would also have a son with the clone of Jean Grey, while, she was dead at the time, and this perfectly played into the hands of Mr. Sinister to create the perfect being. Apocalypse infects the kid with a techno-organic virus, and the only way to save the kid was to send him to live in the future where there was a cure. That kid would eventually be very important to the X-Men lore and would come back as Cable. Cyclops rejoins the X-Men proper in a fight against the 12 where he has his life force drained from him and then merged into Apocalypse. He still lived, and Apocalypse is exorcised out of his body, but it still leaves this dark stain on his soul. And here's where we start seeing the effects of the X-Men film leave their mark on the character. Logan and Jean kiss, Scott has a telepathic affair with Emma Frost, Jean dies again, and now Cyclops is fully with Emma Frost now. I know Scott and Jean was the more iconic pairing, but I personally think Emma was far better for him in the long run. Sure, their relationship didn't start the best way, but they're still madly in love with each other. Emma helps him get over a lot of his demons, and Scott helps bring her back to the good side. There's actual character growth going on, and it's kind of sweet. If Disney wanted to differentiate this version of the X-Men from the previous one, maybe keep Jean Grey out of the picture for a while, since we've already done the Dark Phoenix saga twice already. Then we get to the downward spiral of the X-Men in the comics. House of M and the Decimation get rid of nearly all of the mutants, but 198 of them. The civil war between Cap and Iron Man leads to all the mutants becoming outlaws because they didn't side with the Superhero Registration Act, because they literally dealt with the exact same plot with the Mutant Registration Act. They have their own civil war and schism, they fight the Avengers in Avengers vs. X-Men, and then the Terrigen Mist kills almost all of the rest of the X-Men because someone at Disney didn't want someone else playing with their toys. But in that time, Cyclops had some of his best character work. He was one of the first to break out of the trance that Wanda created for everybody and rallies the rest of the heroes to return things back to normal. He flat out tells everyone, not just the X-Men, but the other heroes as well, that they have to win or they'll lose everything. So they go out there and fight like hell. In Civil War, the Xavier Institute is turned into a relocation camp by the government to intern the mutants. We're trying to stay neutral in all of this. Cyclops leads the team to break out of the camp and joins Captain America's side. Everything that Magneto had warned the X-Men about from his time in the Holocaust came true for the mutants. And Cyclops is now fully on board with his ideology. The mutants finally have their own homeland called Utopia just outside of San Francisco, but the Sentinels keep attacking. Scott becomes so focused on winning that he doesn't care if he uses kids and teenagers in the fight, and that's kind of a problem for the rest of the comic book industry as well, but never mind. But that was the last straw for Wolverine, and he finally comes to blows with Cyclops. There's also some more fun character growth happening. Logan is now the new ideological successor to Xavier. The two split the remaining members of the X-Men, and the Avengers come in to try to stop the Phoenix Force from looking for a new host in Hope Summers. No relation to Scott, just the first mutant baby born after the decimation, and was adopted by Cable, and aged in the future to come back as an adult in a way that only makes sense to Fire Emblem fans, but just go with it. Cyclops goes toe-to-toe with nearly every single Avenger. He gains the power of the Phoenix Force, and is able to bring back all of the mutants. Yet, the Phoenix Force kind of pushes Scott to kill Xavier. The story ends with him being locked up in prison, but after everything he'd been through, after everything he'd done for humanity and mutant kind, he was fine sacrificing himself to become the villain that meant that everyone else was safe. And in the end, Cyclops was right. This wasn't the Scott Summers that film fans knew. This was a multi-decade-long story about how low a man is willing to sink in order to save the world. I know the term anti-hero gets thrown around to describe a dark and edgy superhero that kills, but Cyclops took that to a different level. He only kind of killed Xavier, who, don't worry, he comes back. But even then, he wasn't in complete control. But still, in the comics, Cyclops has essentially become the new Magneto. I don't think Disney would immediately jump into this version of him because there's so much baggage to unpack before he gets to this point. But if they want another crack at the character, I personally think the story God Saves, Man Kills would be a great place to start in today's heavily politicized world. But yeah, what do you guys think about Cyclops and how he's been portrayed? I'd love to read your comments down below. And if you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more weekly content on comic books and nerd stuff. I've been Eric, and you've been awesome.